The year is 845. Winter grips the Frankish lands in silence. A palace crumbles beneath flames, its stone corridors swallowing screams. Through the snow a princess is dragged, not by soldiers but by her own hair. Behind her, trampled into frozen mud, lies a golden crown. The last symbol of a bloodline about to vanish. She begs. She pleads, but what you haven't been told, what the chronicles dare not whisper, is that death would have been the kinder fate. What unfolded in the centuries that followed was so unsettling, so methodically cruel, that medieval scribes, men who documented plague sores and public tortures, chose silence over record. We're speaking of practices so morally corrosive that even a pope who blessed crusades tried desperately to erase them from existence. And buried in these forgotten annals are three truths, three rituals that history has worked tirelessly to bury. The first, the blood infamous as it is, wasn't among the 5 worst destinies awaiting royal captives. There existed something called the thrall crown, a psychological dismantling so complete that it shattered identity itself. Or the second, a marriage tradition so nightmarish that princesses chose death by their own hands rather than endure it. The graves don't lie. The third, one woman who survived this machinery of suffering unleashed vengeance so calculated, so staggeringly brutal, that over 5,000 people perished by her design. The Church, in its infinite contradiction, canonized her as a saint. If you seek the chapters erased from textbooks, the ones historians hoped would fade into dust, stay close, because what I'm about to reveal, the third method, concealed from historical texts for over 2 centuries, carries a truth that even now feels dangerous to speak aloud. Let's descend into what truly happened when Vikings seized a princess. Between the years 793 and 1066, Viking raids weren't scattered acts of coastal violence. They were orchestrated campaigns, surgical strikes targeting the halls of kings and the chambers of queens. 56 documented incidents. 56 royal women princesses. Noblewomen vanished into Viking longships. Those are merely the ones chronicled. How many more disappeared without a single monk's pen to Chinese letter their names? But this wasn't opportunistic plunder. Vikings weaponized these women. Each captured princess represented leverage, a ransom that could drain treasuries, or far darker, a tool to humiliate dynasties so profoundly that entire royal lines crumbled under the weight of shame. Across Europe, from Frankish monasteries to Anglo-Saxon scriptoriums to Irish annals, one phrase appears with haunting repetition: fate's worse than death. Those 4 words echoing through centuries of parchment. Yet 3 specific practices, 3 rituals of suffering, were systematically scrubbed from curricula, vanished from textbooks, buried beneath academic silence that lasted until the 1970s. Only when archaeologists began unearthing physical proof, evidence that couldn't be ignored or reinterpreted, did the truth begin its slow resurrection. Why? Why did scholars conspire to forget? Because what lies beneath is uncomfortable, corrosive to the foundations we've built. Some of Europe's most prestigious noble families today, names you would recognize instantly, trace their bloodlines directly through these captured women. The past isn't distant, it's in the DNA. But that revelation comes later. First, witness the initial hours after capture, when a princess's entire existence begins its methodical erasure. The longship pulls from shore. The chains bite into royal wrists, and ahead waits something they called the thrall crown. Picture yourself 24 hours prior, waking in silk sheets, servants bowing, courtiers addressing you by title, By name, a name heavy with ancestral power. Centuries of royal blood, now you stand on a Viking deck, and they're performing a ceremony designed to unmake everything you were. Royal thraldom, the Frankish annals of St. Burton, dated 882, describe it with clinical precision. First, they strip away every garment, every jewel, and every thread of status. You stand exposed before the crew's eyes, shivering not from cold, but from the dissolution of self. Then the blade, they shave your head completely. In medieval cultures, a woman's hair carried sacred weight, femininity, nobility, marriageability woven into every strand. The Vikings understood this. They were architects of psychological obliteration, transforming princesses into property with calculated strokes. But the cruelest stroke, they replaced your name with a number. Princess Gisela of Francia, daughter to Charles the Bald, among the most powerful rulers in Christendom, was captured in 882 for 3 years according to the annals. She ceased to be Gisela, she became Thrall 47. A number scratched onto an iron collar locked around her throat. Everything she was identityllineage. Mining reduced to 2 digits in a ledger. Then came the markets, Hedeby Burka, Viking trading posts where human thralls were sold like grain. But royal thralls, those auctions were spectacles. Theater designed to maximize degradation. Contemporary sources converge on this. Captured princesses paraded in chains, those numbered iron collars gleaming, while merchants inspected them as they would cattle. Teeth examined, muscles prodded, scars catalogued. The annals record Princess Gisela was sold 3 times in 12 months. 3 owners, 3 auction blocks. 3 times standing while men appraised her worth in silver. You might think at least survival, at least life. But what preceded those auctions remains the deeper shadow. And here the darkness intensifies. There was a ceremony. Christian monks who documented it couldn't bring themselves to write plainly. They used veiled language, calling it the breaking of the crown spirit. In 2003, archaeologists excavating a mass grave in Ireland discovered what those coded phrases concealed. 3 skeletons, confirmed through isotope analysis as royal women from continental Europe, bore evidence that turned historians' blood cold. Repeated bone fractures that had healed, indicating prolonged captivity. Dental trauma consistent with forced feeding. Shoulder joints dislocated and reset multiple times. One woman tried to starve herself to death. They broke her jaw, force-fed her until it healed. She tried again, they broke it again. Because living princesses fetched gold, dead ones fetched nothing. The thrall collar was merely the prologue. Some captured princesses weren't sold at all. They were kept. And what Vikings did with those they kept prompted Pope Nicholas I to pen a specific letter in 865, desperately attempting to ban practices that even the church found unbearable. Don't turn away yet. Because what emerges next explains why some royal women chose to end their own lives, rather than face what awaited them. The year is 847. Princess Thyra of Denmark falls into the hands of a rival Viking faction. She's 17. Over the next 12 years, she will be married 7 times. Not widowed, not divorced, married simultaneously. They called it the peace bride tradition. It stands as one of history's most psychologically corrosive political systems. When a powerful jarl captured an enemy princess, a simple ransom seemed wasteful. It brought wealth but not lasting power. So they devised something crueler, more strategic. The princess became a human treaty, married to an allied jarl in one territory, her royal blood legitimizing his rule. But the marriage wasn't exclusive. She'd be passed to the next ally, then the next, then the next. 6 months here, 2 years there, each ceremony public. Each legally binding under Norse law, Saxo Grammaticus. Writing in the 12th century, preserved Princess Thyra's specific fate because it was so extreme it became legend. In his Gesta Danorum, he writes Princess Thyra was made bride to 7 lords, each in turn taking her as wife while the others lived. As she bore children to 3 of them, yet was called virgin by poets, for her spirit never submitted. Absorb what that means. She's forcibly married to multiple men at once. As she bears children seized from her arms, raised as heirs to separate dynasties. She becomes a breeding mechanism to legitimize multiple political lines, each ceremony designed to fracture her psyche further. Imagine standing in a great hall, hundreds of witnesses. Your previous husband watches from the crowd as you're wed to another man. Traditional bridal garments. Priests intoning blessings, all legal, all sanctioned. All normal in 2011s. Researchers uncovered burial patterns in Norway and Iceland that had puzzled them for decades. High-status women, genetically traced to royal European bloodlines, buried as wives of jarls. The DNA revealed something chilling. Many bore children to multiple men whose graves lay hundreds of miles apart across Scandinavia. A genetic proof of systematic practice. Princesses capture redistributed, bearing heirs for scattered dynasties dying far from home. But it darkens further still. In 865, Pope Nicholas I sent his letter condemning abominable marriage, threatening excommunication. But what's buried in that papal decree? Information not widely known until historians retranslated the document in 1998, reveals something more visceral. The Pope wasn't merely protesting political marriages. He was condemning a ritual that accompanied them. In the original Latin, he describes the gauntlet of the bride. Before each ceremony, the captured princess walked between 2 lines of armed warriors who struck her with the flat of their blades. Not hard enough for permanent injury, just enough to bruise, to humiliate, to inscribe into her flesh that she was property not person. This detail was literally excised from most medieval manuscripts by later scribes who found it too disturbing to preserve. We know it only because 3 uncensored copies survived. Hidden in monastery archives. Did anyone escape? Did anyone fight back? Yes, one did. And what she unleashed was so methodical, so devastatingly calculated, that when you hear the full account, you'll understand why the church draped her in sainthood despite the thousands who burned. But first, the third practice. The one historians attempted to erase from the archaeological record itself. The physical evidence proving its existence was only unearthed in 2018. The year is 866. Vikings conquer Northumbria in what's now northern England. King Osbert falls in battle. His sister, whose name was deliberately erased from all records, we know her only as the Princess of York, is taken alive. 3 days later, they force her to witness the execution of her brother's children, her nephews ages 7 and 9. But witnessing wasn't sufficient. They made her participate. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle documents this in language so disturbing the monks employed euphemisms. Modern historians, cross-referencing with Norse sagas and archaeological finds, have reconstructed what truly occurred. It was called the Blood Witness Ritual. When Vikings captured both a royal woman and her male kin, they performed a specific ceremony engineered to ensure absolute loyalty through spiritual destruction. The princess was forced to physically assist in her family members' executions, holding chains, handing weapons, standing as witness with her hand upon the executioner's shoulder. In 2018, A team excavating a mass execution site in York unearthed something that confirmed the ritual's existence. Shackles in varying sizes buried in specific patterns. Large iron cuffs for adult males, smaller cuffs. Size analysis confirmed for women's wrists. But the detail that validates everything. Chemical analysis of rust patterns showed the smaller cuffs had been held by someone in direct physical contact with the larger cuffs during the execution process. Someone in the smaller restraints was positioned to be touching the person in the larger restraints. When they died, Dr. Helena Mortensen-lead archaeologist, stated in her published report, the physical positioning required by these restraint systems indicates forced participation by a smaller statured person, likely female in the execution process itself. They have physical proof. Women, almost certainly royal captives, shackled in positions requiring them to maintain contact with family members during execution. Why this specific cruelty? It wasn't sadism for its own sake. It was psychological warfare with surgical precision. In medieval Norse culture, witnessing or participating in a kinsman's death without seeking vengeance made you spiritually complicit. The shame attached to your soul. Vikings were deliberately constructing an impossible choice: participate or die yourself. Either path destroyed your honor. Norse legal codes from the period confirm this. A woman who witnessed a kinsman's death without pursuing vengeance was considered nithingr, a person without honor, worthy only of thraldoms. The Vikings were creating royal slaves who couldn't return home even if they escaped, because their own culture now deemed them dishonored. And the execution method itself. This makes the blood eagle seem merciful by comparison. They called it the drowning. The victim, bound in chains, was lowered slowly over the course of hours into a pit gradually filled with water. It's not thrown in, lowered incrementally, while the captive princess stood at the edge, required to help lower the chains. We know this because excavations at 3 sites, York in England, Dublin in Ireland, one location in France, have revealed execution pits with specific architectural features. Stepped interior walls allowing gradual descent. Anchor points at multiple heights for securing chains during the process. The York site contained skeletal remains showing drowning as cause of death, with evidence of prolonged restraint beforehand. Forensic analysis. These victims survived several hours after being placed in restraints. Several hours knowing what was coming, unable to escape, while water rose inch by inch, and the princess had to stand there for hours helping. How widespread was this practice? We have documented evidence of at least 12 separate incidents across 3 countries. 12 confirmed cases of royal women forced to participate in their own family's executions. 12 we know about. How many went unrecorded? Their names erased, their suffering lost to silence. But I promised you something at the beginning. I told you one princess extracted revenge, so extreme she was made a saint for it. Her name was Olga of Kiev. And what she did when power finally rested in her hands will make everything you've witnessed seem almost restrained by comparison. Stay close, because this is where the story becomes almost unbelievable. The year is 945. Princess Olga of Kiev watches her husband, Prince Igor, torn apart by Drevlian warriors. They bind his legs to 2 bent trees, then release them. He's literally ripped in half. The Drevlians, a Slavic tribe that had adopted Viking military tactics, send ambassadors to Olga with a proposal. Marry our prince. Legitimize our rule and will permit you to live. They expect submission. They expect another peace bride like Princess Thyra. Olga has different plans. What unfolds next is documented across multiple contemporary sources. Byzantine chronicles, the Russian primary chronicle, Archaeological evidence from excavation sites. And here's why it matters. Olga's revenge was so methodical, so calculated, so utterly devastating that historians initially dismissed the accounts as exaggeration. Then archaeologists started digging. Let me guide you through exactly what she orchestrated, because this is a masterclass in psychological warfare and systematic vengeance. Phase 1: The Buried Ambassadors. When Drevlian ambassadors arrive in Kiev demanding her submission, Olga welcomes them warmly. She claims to be honored by their proposal. She orders her people to carry the ambassadors, still seated in their boat, through Kiev streets as a gesture of respect. The ambassadors are delighted. They believe they've won. Olga's men carry them directly to a massive pit dug in her courtyard. Then they're buried alive, still sitting in their boat. The Russian primary chronicle records she stood at the pit's edge and spoke to them as soil was shoveled over their heads. Is the honor to your taste? Absorb that. She employed the exact psychological tactic Vikings used on captured princesses, forcing victims to watch their own death approach slowly. Inescapably, in 2003, archaeologists excavating Old Kiev found a mass grave containing a wooden boat's remains and 17 male skeletons showing evidence of live burial. Soil and airways, defensive bone positioning. The dating matches precisely to 945 CE. Phase 2: The Bathhouse Inferno. Olga then sends a message to the Drevlian prince. Send your finest men to escort me to your lands honorably. The Drevlians dispatch their elite nobles. The Russian primary chronicle specifies exactly 47 men. Upon arrival in Kiev, Olga offers them the luxury of a traditional bathhouse before their journey. It's customary and honor for distinguished guests. The nobles enter, servants heed it. Everything seems normal. Then Olga orders the doors barred from outside. The building is set ablaze, all 47 burn alive. Archaeological evidence proves this wasn't legend. Excavations in Kiev between 2015 and 2017 identified remains of a 10th century bathhouse that burned catastrophically. Inside, skeletal remains of 43 individuals, all adult males showing death by fire. Chemical analysis of door remains revealed wood barred from outside, using iron brackets added after original construction, exactly matching the chronicle's description. Phase 3: The Feast of Ashes. Olga sends another message. I'm coming to my husband's grave to hold a funeral feast. Prepare the ceremony. The Drevlians, somehow still not comprehending what's unfolding, prepare an elaborate funeral feast. 5,000 attend, essentially the entire military and political leadership of the Drevlian tribe. Olga's forces serve the mead. They wait until everyone is drunk. Then they slaughter all 5,000. The Russian primary chronicle is explicit. Olga's army fell upon them and killed 5,000. The archaeological evidence. The mass grave site at Iskorostan, the Drevlian capital, contains skeletal remains of thousands from a single violent event dating to the mid-940s CE. Bone positioning shows these people weren't killed in battle. They were massacred while seated or prone, consistent with being attacked while drunk or incapacitated. Multiple skulls show execution-style wounds, single strikes from behind or above, suggesting victims who weren't fighting back. Phase 4: The Bird Army. But Olga isn't finished. She returns with her full army and lays siege to Iskorostan. After a prolonged siege, she sends a message: I've had my revenge. I'll end the siege if you pay a small tribute, just 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows from each household. The Drevlians, desperate, agree immediately. Olga's forces attach small pieces of sulfur wrapped in cloth to the bird's legs. To set them on fire, release them. The birds fly home to their nests in Iskorosten's thatched roofs. The entire city burns in a single night. The Russian primary chronicle, there was not a house that was not burned, and it was impossible to extinguish the flames because all the houses caught fire at once. Archaeological excavations at Iskorosten reveal a catastrophic burn layer dating to the mid-10th century that destroyed approximately 90% of the settlement simultaneously. The destruction pattern is consistent with multiple ignition points throughout the city, exactly what would occur if burning birds landed on thatched roofs across the entire settlement. Now here's the part that fractures comprehension. The Christian church made Olga a saint, Saint Olga of Kiev. A feast day, July 11th. The Orthodox Church calls her equal to the apostles. She's literally venerated as one of Russian Christianity's most important figures. Why? Because after her revenge was complete, she converted to Christianity and spent her remaining years spreading the faith across Kievan Rus. The church essentially declared, yes, she killed thousands in creative and horrifying ways. But she did it before baptism, so it doesn't count. But here's the real historical consequence historians underemphasize. After 945 CE, Viking and Viking-allied groups stopped targeting Slavic royal women for capture. The practice shifted almost entirely to Western European targets, Frankish, Anglo-Saxon Irish nobility. We can track this in the record. Between 900 and 945 CE, 23 documented cases of Slavic princesses captured. Between 945 and 1000 CE, 3. And all 3 were taken by groups unaware of Olga's reputation yet. Word spread: if you capture a Slavic princess, her family will annihilate your entire civilization. Olga's revenge literally altered Viking military strategy for decades. Physical evidence confirms this. Viking grave goods in Eastern Europe after 945 show a dramatic decrease in Slavic royal artifacts, jewelry and status objects taken from captured nobility. Meanwhile, Frankish and Anglo-Saxon royal artifacts increase in the same period. They learned to fear Slavic women. Olga's revenge was so extremeso publicized, so devastating it actually functioned as deterrent. The practice of capturing and abusing royal women didn't, but it shifted geographically. Because one woman demonstrated the cost could be the annihilation of your entire people. Let's synthesize this. Between 793 and 1066 CE, nearly 3 centuries, at least 200 royal women were captured by Viking raiders and allied groups. 200 princesses whose stories were largely erased from popular history. Some were sold into thralldom, identities obliterated, reduced to numbers on iron collars. Some became peace brides, passed between jarls like currency, bearing children for dynasties built on their captivity. Some were forced to participate in their own families' executions, carrying that trauma and spiritual dishonor for the remainder of their lives. And here's the modern connection bringing this full circle. In 2019, a large-scale DNA study of Icelandic populations confirmed approximately 62% of maternal lineages trace back to the British Isles and Western Europe, while paternal lineages are predominantly Scandinavian. The genetic legacy of these captured women is literally written into modern populations' DNA. This practice ended due to 2 major factors: the gradual conversion of Scandinavia to Christianity in the 10th and 11th centuries, and military consequences demonstrated by people like Olga of Kiev, when one princess's revenge proved the cost could be existential. But here's the uncomfortable truth. For nearly 3 centuries, this was normal. This was how power functioned. Royal women were strategic assets, military objectives. tools of political warfare, and most of their names are lost to history. We know Gisla because her father's court kept detailed records. We know Olga because her revenge became legendary. We know Thyra because poets told her story. But most of these women, their DNA sequences in research databases, skeletons in mass graves, iron collars in museum collections with no names attached. So I want to ask you something, and I want you to sit with this before responding. Which part of this story affected you most? Was it the systematic dehumanization of the thrall crown, the psychological torture of the peace bride tradition, the forced participation in family executions, or was it Olga's revenge, and the fact we celebrate her as a saint despite the thousands she killed? And here's the harder question: should we consider Olga a hero for fighting back, or a war criminal for her methods? Is there a moral difference between what was done to these women and what Olga did in response? Share your thoughts below. Be thoughtful, this isn't simple. And I want to see genuine discussion on surface reactions. Next week, I'm investigating what happened to captured Viking warriors when they became prisoners. And trust me, you think this was dark. What the Anglo-Saxons did to captured Vikings makes the Blood Eagle seem like mercy. Make sure you're subscribed if you made it this far. You're clearly someone who values history in all its brutal, uncomfortable truth. Consider liking this. Share it with someone who thinks they know Viking history. And I'll see you in the next one.